Welcome to the Leverage Your Potential podcast. This podcast is hosted by the Director and Assistant Director of Menlo College's Office of Internships, Career Services, and Study Abroad, Dylan Houle and Kelly Davis, in partnership with Menlo's Content Creation Club. Hello and welcome back to the Leverage Your Potential podcast. I am your host today, Kelly Davis, Assistant Director of Career Services and Study Abroad at Menlo College. And I'm here today with Professor Annika Steiber, who is the Director for our Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program here at Menlo. Annika, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
So I'm very excited to interview Professor Steiber on her background. She is originally from Sweden, which I know will come up, and she has been here in Silicon Valley for some time now and is very much involved in a lot of different aspects of what's going on here on the peninsula. So without further ado, I'm going to dive into our first question, which is, Professor Steiber, if you can tell us about how you got to where you are today, what propelled your interest to pursue the degrees that you have, which there are a couple there, and your research in the topics of technology, business, and innovation.
Absolutely. So I think to give you some background, I am from Sweden, and I'm from a city on the West Coast where it was mainly automotive industry, heavy manufacturing industries. I was from a middle class family with more or less no parents that had any bigger vision of higher education. So I think my initial goal was to more or less take my high school degree and then go out and start working. The thing that changed that was one of the teacher, which it tells us how important teacher can be, right? So one of the teacher, he was in one of the technology areas. He said you have to apply for one of the University of Technologies in Sweden, which was in the same city. And I said, why should I do that? You just have to. I mean, you have easy to learn, you understand those kind of engineering topics, and you just have to. So I applied to the school, and it's one of the best in Sweden, and it was really hard to get in. It was like, it was almost like you have to have A's to get in. But I got in, and I was one of 6 women among, I think, 100 students. So at that point in time, a Master in Science was not really for women still. So we were six girls, and the rest were guys. So my background has been very much to study and work with men. And have been very, very male-oriented environment. What I discovered during my sort of university years was that I was honestly very curious, and I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand things, and I had this motto that knowledge is power. So that has been a driver for me all my life. So after that, I decided to continue with a PhD. Instead of going out and start working, I continue with a PhD, and I become a PhD as the first ever in my family ever. So that was a big thing. And I think one driver there was, again, that, I remember I was talking with my grandma, and she didn't even have an education. She was working in the kitchen at schools for her whole life. And when I asked her when she was like 90, what would you have done differently in your life? She said, I would love to have an education. I would love to go to school. So when I took my PhD that day, I was thinking about her, and I hope I made her very, very proud. So curiosity, knowledge, dig for more and more understanding and knowledge. And then, of course, in this malish environment, to be a woman is not easy. So that became a driver in itself as well, that I want to be independent and I wanted to, therefore succeed in what I did. So I became quite driven in my work and in my research. So yeah, so 10 years ago, I moved over from Sweden to Silicon Valley. And the reason was that I've been more or less working as an executive and doing research aside in Sweden. And then I got this contract with Google, and they invited me over to do a 1-year study. And I took the chance. I quit everything. I quit my job. I took family, and we moved over to the US. And that was 10 years ago. And that was a big shift in my life. So yeah, so that is what led me to where I am today, because my focus on at Google was entrepreneurship in a big corporation, how a big corporation can keep to be entrepreneurial. And at that point in time, that was totally new. It was very little research on it. And when my Google book came out in 2014, it was one of the first on the topic that described from a corporate perspective everything like culture, leadership, HR, and how all those things can drive innovation and entrepreneurship. So that sort of established the foundation for what I teach today.
Wow, thank you for sharing all of that. I hadn't, and I think that this comes from, a place of very special privilege, I would say. I hadn't even thought of how you were probably one of very few women in what you were doing at the time. I mean, I think that these industries now are very much male dominated, but even more so while you were just starting out. So that's very interesting. Yes. to think about, and you're such a leader now in what you're doing. So it's really, really impressive. And I loved what you said about knowledge and thinking about your family and where your family came from, and what your grandmother said. I think we all do that to some extent, think about how much that means for our family and what we were able to achieve that maybe they didn't have the same opportunities to. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Right.
And so while you came here and you started working for businesses, but it seems that you kept up some of your teaching, and you talked about knowledge as being something, knowledge is power. Were there any other elements that drove you to continue teaching as you're prominently a professor today?
So this is pretty ironical, because I hated to be on stage. When I was young, I never was in the center of anything. I hated to have all eyes on me. I was terrified. I was sweating. I was nervous. I couldn't remember what to say. And in the Swedish schools, you don't practice as in the American schools to provide speeches or to stand up and speak. So I was absolutely terrified to go up and do and teach. That was not even in my universe. The thought that I was going to teach one day. The thing that changed that was that when I did my Google study, it was so new. So suddenly I went out and I started to do, I taught executives. So I did those, huge speeches for thousands of people. And then I also started to be invited to do seminars and specific educational programs for companies. And I guess in the beginning I was pretty bad because I was still very nervous and I wasn't used to it. But after a while, I've been, giving speeches to like 70,000, almost 100,000 people all around the world. So in the end, I was so comfortable. And so at one point in time, I decided, I do want to continue the teaching also for students that I'd done for the Swedish university, I was still belonging to. As I was taking up my PhD again, I had to sort of do certain teaching there frequently over at Sweden. But I became so interested in teaching, and I found it more and more enjoyable. So I actually took on a teaching assignment at Santa Clara University. And that was just before I started Menlo. So I have been teaching for the students, but I think what really developed me further was all those speeches and leadership educational programs and seminars for executives, which really forced me to think through everything from the design of the program, the content, how to present, how to look when you present, and all those kind of things. So I had to take a lot of also extra courses to be able to do that in a good way.
What was it like to work with all of these different executives and to speak in front of them and to collaborate?
I found it very, very interesting and very rewarding, because at that point in time, now we talk about like 2010. I think the peak was in 2012, 2014, where I gave number of speeches every week or different kind of educational seminars. The rewarding thing was that you could see that it actually affected the company. So one example was that I was working for a big shipping company, and they were very early on discussing digital transformation of their businesses. So how new emerging digital technology would change their business model and how they need to change accordingly. They didn't know what it really meant or how to do it. So they started to take an online course that I provided in Sweden. And then they attended some of my seminars. And then I came there and I did some consultancy work for them. And then suddenly that became the sort of the foundation for their whole transformation program for the company. And that is one of the biggest companies in Sweden. So it's pretty, it's pretty impactful. When you can have that kind of impact on a company, is very, very rewarding, right? But it's equally rewarding to see a student where you see the light is just light up in the eyes of the students, like, oh my God, I never heard this, I never thought like this before. And this is just it's giving them more inspiration and new inspiration. So on the individual level is great and very rewarding too.
And I do think that your students value you so much. I mean, it's interesting. The one course that I think I did a brief presentation of, I was on study abroad, if you remember, at the beginning of this academic year, and that was one of your upper division courses. And speaking of male dominated, it was very male dominated. But of course, you're also one of the mentors for the Women in Impact and Leadership Development Club. But so to see how much these students value being taught by you is really incredible and something you must be so proud of. So in thinking about that, I think that the students might love to hear how you ended up here at Menlo, if there was a connection, or how you heard about Menlo and ended up being one of our full-time faculty and a director of a program.
Absolutely. So I was working in Europe more or less full-time, and I lived in Silicon Valley because after my research project with Google, I did some further research project here with Facebook and Tesla and others, which became my second book. But all my work, all my money my revenue streams came from Europe. So what I did was that I did research here, and then I worked in Europe, where I packaged my research to leadership program, to online educational programs, going back to my old university and teach there. And it was after almost 7 years doing that, I felt I felt like I was not really part of the local community here where I lived. I wanted almost desperately to belong to a community. And I also had been traveling so much, so I didn't really feel that well. My body didn't feel well with all those travels. So it became harder and harder to do all those long flights. So so I was introduced by one of the board of or board of trustees at Menlo at the time. She recommended me to go to Menlo College website and look up opportunities for new employments or new positions, because she said that there had been some openings, and so I did. And then I applied and I was invited. So that was the way to Menlo. It's quite interesting. It's like a small oasis, in Menlo Park, Atherton, that many pass, but few actually turn into and get to know. And I think I was the same before I was interviewed and went to campus. So, but it's a great place.
I totally agree with that. I grew up around here and I went to the local public high school, and I would bike home through Menlo College's campus. This was in 2011, 2012. So, all I knew is that I biked through, and it's crazy to think my office is not far from that pathway now, but it is a really special place for sure. So what do you envision for the future now that you're the director of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program? What are you excited about, and what are some of your hopes, your plans? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm pretty competitive. So and I'm not known to be having bad confidence. So my vision and my goal is, of course, to provide an absolutely leading and great program in entrepreneurship and corporate innovation, which is actually two research areas. It's two different disciplines. The corporate innovation is entrepreneurship and how you create a large corporation that is entrepreneurial and very innovative, and then entrepreneurship in its classical meaning, starting businesses or startup. There's absolutely no reason for us to not have as good program as Berkeley or Stanford, and with the research experience and with the knowledge I have by being out at corporation. I still work with 9 of the largest European companies in a research project and 1 Chinese company. I know that what we offer, what I offer, is leading edge. So I don't see any reason why we cannot create, an equally good program. So that has been my ambition from start. So what I do right now is that I've been working now for the last 2 years to look over the curriculum and the portfolio of courses. We're adding new courses all the time that have been missing. So digital transformation of businesses, which is maybe one of the hottest topic in the world right now among CEOs. We introduced that course already, I think, during the second semester, my first year. I also have developed a course on how to manage disruptive innovation, which is very much more on change management, which companies need to be very, very good at. We have relaunched the senior capstone course, launching a startup. And now we are going to recruit an external expert from Silicon Valley that will run that program. So it will be super great. And the digital transformation course is also run by an external pro from that work for General Electric Digital and for Oracle that knows the technology. And we are coming in with new courses. We have the creativity and collaboration launched, I think, 1 year ago. We have soon another course on the first course on product development, product management, which is a key process for any innovation work. So we will teach the student the latest in how you do modern, 2020 product development, product management in innovative companies. So that is one activity. I try to get the portfolio courses to be very, very competitive and very strong. And the other thing is that I look at the courses on different levels. So I talk about initiate and activate. Initiate is courses or are courses that are more inspirational and give you the basic knowledge. But you don't really do innovation work so much. You more learn about, all the management concepts, all the methods and tools and, terminology. What is innovation? What does it mean by entrepreneurship? Why is the entrepreneur so important? Give the context around that. And what is digital transformation? What does it mean? And give a context about new emerging technology and how disruptive it is for society and companies. Those are initiate courses. They are inspirational, give you a foundational knowledge. Then next step is activate. Those are courses that actually give you the competences and skill sets. So you will have to do a design thinking, 15-week of driving an idea or insight to an idea to a solution and test that solution. The launching a startup is definitely an Activate course where you actually have to start a company more or less. Everything but doing the legal work. We also have the entrepreneurial finance and entrepreneurial marketing is also Activate courses. You actually have to learn how to do financials in a very, like an early startup or marketing job to identify the customer needs in order to start a business or a new growth area. So I more and more separate the courses into maybe not lower and higher division, but more like mindset and basic knowledge, and then the skill set to provide them skill set in another cluster of courses. And then what my inspiration is, or my hope right now, I'm going to work for that, is that we are going to be able to provide an incubator platform for startups that are originated at Menlo, that we will be able to put them in an incubator platform where they get business services, mentors, and also network to angel investors. We also are going to start summer programs in entrepreneurship for high schoolers to attract new students. So it's a lot of things going on. I have an ambition to create an excellent corporate excellence center where I continue with my research, leading edge research on this kind of management for innovation entrepreneurship. So I think we might start that up already this year, where we're going to do more heavy research on campus, so we can position ourselves in that field.
That all sounds incredible. I think that I love your ambition. The confidence, I think, is going to serve Menlo and its students so well. And I just got so excited thinking, wow, this is an incredible program. And what I love about it also is a couple of things. The flexibility, as the study abroad advisor, the hardest part about getting students abroad is if they don't have flexibility in their course schedules. And I think that can almost be stifling. So I know it's necessary in some fields, but I love that you're bringing a lot of flexibility to this degree. The other thing, I love how you have innovate and activate. Was that it? The two, the more mindset and
initiate. Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
initiate,
initiate, sorry.
activate. Yeah,
um,
close.
but I think that's so perfect. There's this debate in higher education that we need more and more practical skills, but it's so important that we don't forget those theoretical frameworks are also just crucial, and how we end up going about implementing and activating and implementing those skills, and bringing them to the workforce or whatever it is we do afterwards. So I think that's super, super
Right.
cool. And I want to do this program. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I hope the students will see that, because you don't have to take a management major in entrepreneurship. I mean, you can just take those, the initiate courses, and you will learn a lot on them. And then you can go on with your financial major, whatever. But I do think that if you learn and go over to these activate courses, that where you actually get the skill set on how to innovate, oh my God, you will increase your value for any company out there. So I think in the end, unfortunately, I think more and more people will have to be able to survive by themselves. I think there will be harder and harder, to get a fixed job and to stay a long, long time at a workplace. So if you don't know how to survive, by starting your own businesses, or running a consultancy firm, or starting a startup or whatever, unfortunately, I think you become much more vulnerable in your life. I think that is a security, that is a job security by getting those skills.
I see what you're
That
saying.
I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't dare. Sometimes I remember I was sitting by a red light, and I saw people passing, and they were all on their way to work. It was like 8 a.m. in the morning. They were all going to work. And I thought for myself, how many of those, if they're fired tomorrow, right? How many of those will then just start applying for a job, at another big corporation, because they are not capable, because they are not comfortable with it, they don't know how to do it, they don't have contacts, to start something themselves, right? So they are only, they're totally depending on other big corporation to hire them again. And it's just so vulnerable. I mean, for me, it's really risky. So because I've been there. I had fixed jobs. I've been my own. I have fixed jobs. I have been my own. I've gone back and forth, and it's super scary the first time you do it. It's really scary. And if you haven't trained it, or sort of, yeah, be prepared for that kind of mindset, and maybe get the basic methods and tools, and also the network through our courses, which we actually bring in Silicon Valley, network to those courses and to those people. I think that can just, I think that hopefully they can bring a higher security to the students, that they will always be doing well. If it doesn't turn out well there, they can do something else, and they can start their own thing if they want to.
Absolutely, I hear you. I think that there's nothing wrong with wanting to either right away start your own business, or get some experience working for a company, or maybe you want to keep working for companies, but to at least be able to pivot in that way that you can be more independent and self-reliant if it comes to that, which I think we're seeing a lot right now, with all of the layoffs that are beginning to happen due to the coronavirus. We're seeing a lot more content creators out there. It'll be interesting to see who rises from that and what other things people end up doing, but it's definitely an incredibly valuable skill that you're imparting through this program. So I'm going to turn slightly and ask this next question, which I will likely play into the other themes of what we've been discussing. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about those research projects that you are working on now, if anything sticks out, anything you're particularly excited about and want to share with us.
Absolutely. So my focus right now is a concept we call open innovation, and it's part of of the bigger sort of umbrella of corporate innovation. So the problem is for most big companies, including Google, including all big, is that they lose their innovativeness, they lose their entrepreneurship over the years. Even if companies like Google are better to keep it, the pace, the technology development pace is so fast. So it's really hard for any company to survive by doing innovation only by themselves. So what they apply is something we call open innovation, and that can be in very, very many different forms. What it means is that they start to source innovation from outside and inside. So they use innovation wherever it is. And my project right now is, it has actually been going on for 7 years. So I think we are in our 8th year now. It's funded by the Swedish government. It's the Innovation Agency of Sweden, and they paid us now for 8 years in a row. And it's big corporations like Ericsson, ABB, Electrolux, which is like GE appliances. We have actually General Electric Healthcare with us in the project. We have Volvo, that you might know. We have a number of companies. So there are 9 companies all in all. And what is common with all of them are that they are working with startups in order to become very innovative. And they all have very different models on how they do it. So what we have been doing now over the last 8 years is that we more or less have followed those companies from the beginning, where they were sitting thinking about, oh, wow, how are we going to become more innovative? And then we came in and said, have you thought about maybe open up and start working with startups? Oh my God, no, we never thought about that. Maybe that could be a good idea. So from that stage to today, where they have been running now for maybe 3-4 years, models where they collaborate in different ways with startups. So we have followed that over the 8 years, and that is what we do with the European companies. So we have meeting, we do a lot of interviews, we also do a lot of seminars. Before we had, when we had this kind of principle of that they were to learn in the research project, not only us. Usually as a researcher, you sit there and you just suck out all the information, and then they have to wait like 1 to 2 years before they get a research paper, and then they can read about what we thought. We didn't want to do that kind of research. We wanted them to learn from each other. So it would really be beneficial for the country by having all the big companies, collaborating and share experiences, so they could accelerate their innovativeness, all of them in the same time, and therefore, for the country. So we had 9 different workshops where we just went, have full day workshop at each of those companies, where they invited all the other companies. And then, we collected data while they were also sharing how they did, what was successful, what didn't work. They were very transparent, fantastically open, with everything. So that is that project. Then I'm working with a company in China that is maybe the most interesting digital transformation case right now. So I'm working with them as well. And in that project it's the digital transformation that is the most interesting, and their new management model that they are developed. They are maybe more advanced than Google, I would say today, in their way of thinking about, they use their practices is not even in research yet. It's so front leading edge, so it's not found in school books. You cannot read about their way of doing or running their company in leading management literature that we use at MBAs or at schools, because it's so new. So what I try to do is to codify that and to help to translate that over into educational material and scholarly work. So that is super exciting, but it's also very, very hard, because it's very hard to understand, because there's no theory, I mean, there's no standardization of this. There's no books I can read. And then the Chinese language and Chinese culture is really hard. So, so that is what I do right now.
So you're really starting from scratch on that one.
Yeah, it's pretty funny story because I was publishing my second book on the Silicon Valley companies. So Google, Facebook, Tesla, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and those companies were case companies in my second book, which is called Silicon Valley Model Management for Entrepreneurship. And then I was contacted by this Chinese company. So the CEO of the company had translated the English book into Chinese by having a Chinese employee translating the full book because it's not in Chinese yet. They translated the book and then he read the whole book. Apparently he's reading like a new book every week. And they send me an email saying, we would like to invite you to China. We think we are more advanced than Google. Do you want to come?
Bold statement.
Yeah, that was a start. Yeah.
Wow. So how do you find time for all of that? You're doing these incredible things with the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program at Menlo, and you have these two really robust, fascinating research projects that you're working on. How does it all factor into a day?
Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I say, and it's not actually a joke, but I say like I seem like I'm killing myself with work, that I'm just working, but I work 7 days a week. I work all the time, more or less, except when I, enjoy a good lunch with my family or something like that. But I also collaborate. I need to collaborate with really great people. So I found over the years, I found really great people that I co-write with and that are very productive and very fast in their work, which I have to have. I cannot work with slow researchers. It doesn't work. So when I find those researchers, when it's really click, and you can produce a research paper maybe in a 2-week period because you are so productive, then it works. But it's you need this network with people, otherwise you will never ever be able to do it.
Definitely. I think that's a beautiful piece of advice. So thank you for sharing that. So one more question pertaining to everything more of your research. How has COVID-19 and all the changes that it's bringing, or at least temporarily, I'm sure there will be much longer impacts, of course. Is this impacting your research at all, or anything that any of your predictions for how things like the digital transformation economy, the direction it's going in?
So to answer first how it has affected my research, I would say it has positively affected my research, which is maybe odd. But what I mean by that is that so my focus is qualitative research. So I do interviews. I do a lot of interviews, and I prefer to do interviews over electronic medias like this, like Zoom or Skype. I think it's much more efficient than actually, going there and sit there for an hour and be having all this kind of noise and distractions around me. So, so we continue with the interviews as we should anyway. In fact, the executives that we interview have more time now for being interviewed because they are home. I also personally get more time to do my own papers. So I've had the time to actually get published a number of papers because of this isolation. And regarding China, maybe negatively there because I cannot and I will not go to China now. And that is a trickier case because it's not as easy to do over Zoom because of the culture and language problem. But I do think that that could, you remember I talked about creating an excellence center in management innovation. Right now there's a lot of people that want something really fun to do. And I think that can actually be beneficial for Menlo College as well, that we can find great people now that are having available time that can help out. So it might be positive also for that. From a global perspective, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. The only benefit I see with this is how extremely impactful it would be if we in the world would decide that we do the same thing with, say, climate change, right? I think
Yes.
COVID-19 has actually proved that we can act. We can act really, really fast if we want. And we don't have to have 5 cars, and we don't have to use the car if it's 2 miles. We can take the bike, and we can use this opportunity now to sort of more or less put in more regulations, like if you are closer than that distance, you need to walk or bike, take public transportation. But it's I think we needed this kind of kick in the butt, actually. And this, I think many researchers, it's not really my field yet, it might be, but I think the researchers that are in this field is studying this heavily now. So I think it will come out a number of interesting research papers on it.
For sure. That cannot be denied. I completely agree with you. One of my dreams for Silicon Valley is that we actually keep everyone, maybe not everyone, but as many people remote as possible for beyond the period it's necessary, so that we can build in some better trams or something like that, have a little bit, kind of build the infrastructure. Right. That would be awesome. That would be like one silver lining, I think, and have a really big impact. Mm-hmm. But I certainly resonate with what you say. If we have demonstrated that we can mobilize quickly, then there are some things that we needed to do that regarding, years, decades ago. So I agree with you there. Well, thank you so much for providing all this fun information. I have one more fun question for you, which is, what is your recipe for that wonderful Swedish holiday drink that I might butcher the pronunciation, so you'll have to correct me, but glögg, right?
Yeah, it's glögg. So glögg is, there's an easy way to do glögg, and it's a hard way. If you want to do your own glögg, it's actually an alcoholic drink, right? So you need to have, it's like a low alcoholic dark malt beverage called svagdricka. But I think you can use some kind of malt beverage, darker one. You have yeast in that, and you have a lot of sugar, you have raisins, and you have cloves, I think it's called, and cardamom. And then you let that stand, and sort of become alcohol. So it's like a wine. It's developing over you let it stand there for a couple of weeks, or a month even, and it becomes like a wine with a fantastic taste. If you don't want to do that, you can go to IKEA and you can buy the non-alcoholic version of glögg, and then you pour that in a pot, and then you add at least 1/3 vodka to it. So you get the alcohol in there, and you get this, the spices will be the same, and then the vodka will bring the sting to it, right? Mm-hmm. So that is the easy way to do it.
Thank goodness for IKEA, right? For those who are a little lazier. But I think I tried some of yours, not this past holiday, but the one before, if you brought any.
Yeah. It's pretty dangerous because it's very sweet, right? And it's really good. And then the vodka is making it super strong. So it just go up to your head immediately. So and then making it warm. But it needs to be warmed, right? So it's warmed up and it's sort of just penetrating you very fast, and then poof. So it's having a pretty intense effect very quickly.
Yeah. So definitely a fun drink for anyone to try. It's especially popular in the holiday season. So thanks for sharing that with us. And thank you so much for joining us today. This was really great. I know I learned a lot, and I hope that any of the students who listen in learn a little bit about your own background and what we hope to see in the future, which is probably the most exciting part. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leverage Your Potential podcast. Episodes are posted weekly and can be found on our blog at blog.menlo.edu/career-services/. Make it a great day.